Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and let's begin today with a story out of Colorado, where two daughters and an accused husband finally received some answers in the death of Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne grew up in Alexandria, Indiana, where she met her first real love and sweetheart, Barry Morphew, at a local golf course. And this was that, butterfly-inducing kind of meetup. Barry had been a star baseball player at their local high school who wasn't just high school good. He was next level talented and was drafted right into the MLB playing for the Toronto Blue Jays. But his dream of playing in the big leagues was shattered almost as soon as it started when a career-ending injury sent him back to Alexandria. It was when Barry had returned to their hometown that the two met. Suzanne graduated high school after the two started dating, and they made plans to attend Purdue University together. The two were still dating when at the age of 20, Suzanne was diagnosed with an aggressive form of lymphoma cancer. It seemed this challenge didn't scare Barry. He stepped up. He started taking care of Suzanne all through the ugly stages of chemotherapy and the difficulties that accompany the battle of cancer. Could anyone have blamed Barry if he had bailed during this time? The two aren't married. He's only 23, but he literally carried her through the treatment. And eventually, Suzanne beat the cancer. And in 1994, the two married. Suzanne went on to teach middle school, and Barry started his own landscaping business. The hopes of having children were dimmed by the many drugs that Suzanne had ingested to face and fight the cancer. But that didn't stop the religious couple from prayerfully attempting to start a family. Eventually, the two would go on to both say, God bless them with two beautiful daughters, Mallory and Macy. So they're in Indiana raising a family, and when the two girls grow older and Mallory spreads her wings and enrolls in college in Colorado, Suzanne couldn't bear the thought of not having their family together. The couple packs up their younger daughter, Macy, and they move to Colorado as well. The family chose to put down roots in Salida, where they purchased a home nestled in the pines on 7 acres of land. So picture a home/cabin with pine needles scattered on the deck and sounds of birds chirping instead of cars driving by. Barry took all of his knowledge in the landscaping business, and he began anew in Salida. By this time, it is May of 2020 and Mother's Day weekend. Mallory and Macy are with friends camping in neighboring Idaho, and Barry, well, he's on his way to Denver conducting some business on that Sunday that was Mother's Day. Now, this leaves Suzanne all alone on her special day, and the girls were feeling pretty guilty about leaving their mother on that one day she gets to be celebrated. They texted, but Suzanne didn't answer, and then they tried to call. But Suzanne didn't answer there either. By the afternoon, the girls were crossing over from concerned to alarmed, so they phoned a neighbor to go check on their mother. The neighbor had no luck either. Suzanne wasn't answering their knocks at the family home front door. So the neighbor called Barry, who, remember, he's in Denver doing business. Barry, trying to remain calm, asked the neighbor to check the garage for Suzanne's mountain bike. Barry said she was planning to ride that Sunday, so maybe she just wasn't back yet? Well, the neighbor did verify the bike wasn't in the garage, but the daylight hours were waning, and Barry knew she should really be back by now. As a precaution, the neighbor phoned the police while Barry closed up his job in Denver and headed home. Now, put some things in perspective here. This is mountainous terrain. People sometimes get hurt riding, or they'll get a flat, or they might just get lost on the trails. So there could be a reasonable explanation for no one being able to get in touch with her. And it's important to remember, she also liked to take rides solo, and she probably was doing so on this Sunday. So more reason not to get completely frantic, but they really do need to start looking for her before it gets dark. Police started searching trails, and it didn't take them long to discover Suzanne's mountain bike crashed halfway down an embankment near the family home. Police scooped up the bike and returned it to the family home. And when they pull up, a young man is standing in the driveway. It's Macy's boyfriend. Macy had sent him to the house because it was the only way she could do something since she and Mallory were on their way back from their camping trip in Idaho. He told investigators he had been out looking for Suzanne, but he didn't find her either. He also told investigators he was a little worried because Barry and Suzanne had been fighting. Well, eventually, Barry makes the 3-hour drive back to the family home, and police body cam footage shows him pulling up to the family home where he is pretty much frantic at this point. He's firing off questions like, where's her bike? Where was it found? Did an animal get her? Did she crash? And this is about the time that investigators start to zero in on Barry. And you know what? You really can't blame them. He's the last person to see Suzanne. He's the spouse, prime suspect, right? But Barry opens the family home to investigators. He turns over some of Suzanne's clothing for the search dogs to track her scent, and he openly answers questions that police have for him. He said he left at about 5 a.m. that morning, and Suzanne was still asleep in bed. Police found Suzanne's ID and wallet in her car in the garage, but they never find her cell phone. And the strangest things that they did find were her sunglasses and hydration pack. These are two things she would have never gone riding without. Well, several hours later, searchers discover Suzanne's bike helmet in a location that is directly opposite to the location of where her wrecked bike was found. So here's the family home. So the bike is on the road in one direction from the home, and the helmet is on the side of the road in the opposite direction of the home. Now, investigators are a little stumped, and they start digging into the past of Barry and Suzanne as the search for Suzanne continues over the days. They discover that the move from Indiana to Colorado wasn't just to follow their daughter to college. The marriage was in trouble, and Colorado was intended to be the fresh start the couple needed. And the search for Suzanne, well, it just carried on all summer. Friends, family, volunteers that were spending countless hours, but she was never found. And the girls, Macy and Mallory, they in particular are a wreck all summer long. And Barry won't sleep in the couple's bed. He spends every night on the couch. And to be honest, he's cooperating with law enforcement. Over the summer, he participated in over 30 hours of taped interviews with authorities. But the internet mob was coming after him, and Suzanne's family was starting to be skeptical about Barry. Suzanne's sisters said Barry had cheated on Suzanne in the past. And then, that November, Barry did the weirdest thing. He cast a mail-in ballot for his missing wife in the general election. He claimed he just wanted Trump to win, and that he knew Suzanne would want him to do that. That's strange at best. Then, near the 1-year anniversary of Suzanne's disappearance, police arrest Barry for the murder of his wife. Police told the public in a statement that the motive of the murder was the crumbling marriage. They then pointed to text messages where Suzanne is telling Barry she is done, saying she is tired of what he has been up to for years. Then another set of messages between Suzanne and her sister Melinda, where she says she had endured years of emotional and physical abuse. Now, those messages that were between Suzanne and Melinda, those were sent just 2 days before she disappeared. Police then pointed to Barry's cell phone. They used pings from the phone to show Barry's behavior in the Saturday evening hours and the early morning Sunday hours of that Mother's Day weekend. They claim his phone was erratically pinging in the evening, almost like he's running around the house, from the bedroom to the garage to the back door, then back in the house. An investigator's explanation of it is that they theorize Barry was chasing Suzanne through the home. Now, even more bizarre than the zigzaggy movements of the cell phone, following those erratic pings, Barry puts his phone on airplane mode for several hours. All right, there's another thing, the third thing. Investigators say the door frame to the master bedroom was damaged. They believe it was from Barry breaking into the bedroom. Okay, then there's a fourth thing, a fourth bit of evidence. Investigators found a tranquilizer dart cap in the dryer. The cap had Suzanne's DNA on it. And there's more. The fifth thing, remember, Barry said he left at 5 a.m. for the job in Denver. Well, his truck data indicated that the doors to the truck were opening and closing in the hours of 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. Now, Barry, he had some explanations for these things. First, he said he tranquilizes animals and illegally cuts off their horns while they are in a medically induced sleep. And then he sells the horns for profit. Okay, he also said the door to the bedroom was damaged when they bought the house. He then said about the doors opening and closing on the truck between 3 and 4 that he just had the time wrong that morning when he said he got up at 4:30. He had an early day ahead of him, and he said he was just getting up and getting ready, loading tools and supplies into his truck. Police weren't done with the evidence found in the truck GPS. They say Barry's truck made 5 separate stops on the way to Denver that morning. And at each stop, there were dumpsters that surveillance footage shows Barry throwing trash bags away. Okay, there's one final piece. Investigators found a spy pen, and that pen had been purchased by Suzanne. But the information that had been recorded on that pen actually framed Suzanne for an affair she was having. Remember, she had led her family to believe Barry was cheating, and I have no idea if he was or wasn't, but the spy pen shows that Suzanne was cheating with an old friend from high school. In fact, she had exchanged over 50 texts with that lover on the Saturday of Mother's Day weekend. But something weird happened. She never texted him again after Barry arrived home on that Saturday. Okay, this totally led investigators to believe that she had actually met her fate on Saturday evening, not Sunday while she was supposedly riding her bike. They're theorizing she should have been still texting her lover on Sunday after Barry went to Denver. Well, Barry told investigators he had no idea about the affair Suzanne was having, and he explained away the erratic pings on his cell phone by saying he was chasing chipmunks on the property. And the dumpster stops, well, he has an explanation for that too. He says those were because he was just disposing of household trash. He claimed he was cheap and he didn't want to pay for waste disposal. All right, this is far from a slam dunk case for the prosecution. There's no body and no DNA proving Suzanne had perished. And how about this weird DNA twist that was added to the whole thing? They found in Suzanne's car DNA from a sexual assault attacker that was linked to crimes in Arizona. How bizarre is that? And as of today, there is still no explanation for that DNA that was found in Suzanne's car. Okay, just let all of that case settle in. While I assure you that the girls, Mallory and Macy, they're 100% supporting their father. They thought the prosecution's case was full of holes and that their dad was innocent. Well, just weeks before this case was set to go to trial in April of 2022, the case against Barry is dismissed. Basically, it boiled down to the fact that the state did not have enough evidence to move forward after some evidence and witnesses were blocked from being part of the trial due to procedural mistakes by the prosecution. So the judge stepped in after the defense had filed some motions, and he dismissed the charges. This left the girls and Barry thrilled, but it left the state and investigators without a closed case, or for that matter, without a body. And it also left the door open for Barry to be charged at a later date if more evidence was found. Then, in May of this year, so that was about a year after the charges were dismissed, Barry filed a civil rights lawsuit against Chaffee County, its prosecutors, CBI employees, and FBI employees. Barry is seeking $15 million in damages. The lawsuit claims that Barry was charged, arrested, and prosecuted, and his property was seized for a crime he did not commit, and that Barry spent 5 months in jail, approximately 6 more months wearing a GPS ankle monitor with severe restrictions on his movement, and then almost a year defending himself against the criminal charges. The lawsuit also alleges Barry's name and reputation have been, quote, irreparably tarnished in Colorado and all around the country. Okay, so why am I telling you this story now? Well, on September 27th, just a couple of weeks ago, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation announced they had found the remains of Suzanne Morphew. Now, I'm going to warn you, information is still scant, but it has been released that enough remains were available, that an autopsy has been done, and pending the results of the toxicology, authorities believe they will be able to release a cause of death. So where were Suzanne's remains found? Well, it was nowhere near the home, nor the damaged bike, nor the bike helmet. The remains were discovered in Moffat, Colorado. That's about 45 miles south of her Salida, Colorado home. and that's in the opposite direction of Denver, where Barry was headed. Investigators stumbled across the remains as they were searching for another woman, Edna Quintana. And in total, 5 people have either disappeared or been found in the same area where Suzanne's remains were found. So let's do this right. We need to recognize those 5. We have Suzanne, and then Edna, and a woman named Crystal Reisinger, and then an unidentified man, and another set of remains that were just found last weekend. So investigators have yet to release information about those. And Barry's attorney said the following after the announcement of the finding of Suzanne's body. He said the first and most important focus should be that the Morphews just learned that they lost their beautiful mother and wife after she disappeared 3.5 years ago. And he followed that up with the accusation that there appears to be an overriding focus of finger pointing right back where it started 3.5 years ago, a movement to blindly reaccuse Barry of Suzanne's death. I guess, to say the least, the internet mob is active again. Now, authorities say they are actively working on the case, and all tips should be directed to call 719-312-7530. Okay, it's obvious this one is not over. I'll be following this case, plus Edna's and Crystal's and the other remains that were found in Moffat. As more information comes forward, I'll let you know once I know. All right, let's stay in Colorado, and I kind of feel like I needed to cut Ohio a break. I've covered several crimes from there recently, and that prompted a listener to comment that Ohioans are really nice people despite the stories coming out of the state. And guess what? There's no judgment from the rise in crime community, Ohio. Unfortunately, there is plenty of crime to go around, and so this episode, we're going to focus on Colorado. All right, the Return to Nature Funeral Home in Penrose, Colorado, boasts a carbon-neutral alternative to cremation. That's a mouthful, right? I'm going to say in a very non-gentle way, this is basically human composting. And I explain that just for understanding. There's no disrespect to those who have passed. This carbon neutral alternative is a 45-day process which forces the body into decomposition. And then the soil with the decomposed body is returned to the family to use for scattering or for planting. And some of the soil is also, per their website, sent to their Olympic Peninsula Conservation Site in order to aid in land restoration projects. Now, the website also boasts that the soil transformation process is for nature lovers, for conservationists, and for those who just want to protect the planet for future generations. But I really want you to pay attention to this next sentence from their website. Their sustainable urban funeral process promises a 24/7 best-in-class care. Best in class. That's the kind of care they're promising. Now, the website promises that once the funeral home is contacted and the legal paperwork has been signed, that within that 24 hours, the body will be gathered and the process of transformation will begin. They then claim that within the next 2 to 5 days, the process starts to show your loved one a private and dignified experience. Okay, it's important to note for this story that this funeral home seems to be like some sort of franchise type setup. There's locations that are scattered all throughout the West. There's several dozen locations in California, a few in Idaho and in Washington, even more locations in Arizona, and then just a few in Utah and Oregon, and then also those locations in Colorado. But the Penrose location has become central to an investigation by the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. See, law enforcement has received multiple complaints about a foul odor coming from the funeral home. Now, once police received access to the funeral home, they discovered at least 115 bodies that had not been treated properly. And this is not a large funeral home. It's single story and it's not incredibly big, about 2,500 square feet. The building is actually adjacent to the post office, which is going to be regularly visited by residents in the town of about 3,000 people. I'm just guessing it's some of those people visiting the post office that were complaining about the smell of the foul odor. Now, it's been reported by KRDO that the owners, John and Carrie Halford, had allowed the business license to expire in November of last year, so the funeral home is not even legally operating right now. And KRDO is also reporting that multiple civil lawsuits have been filed against the El Paso, Colorado Springs, Colorado location. Okay, interesting side note. Neither of those locations, Penrose or El Paso, are listed on the funeral home website. But if you search for those locations, a link will come up on the page. It's almost like it's kind of hidden on the page. And KKTV reported that on Thursday, the Halfords refused to allow investigators to enter the funeral home. So investigators returned on Friday with a warrant. And that is when they found the unattended to bodies, and all the horror was discovered. KKTV also said John Halford admitted to having a problem at the Penrose location, but he didn't expand on what problem meant. And if this story couldn't get any more skeezy, John Halford also does taxidermy services out of the same building. Now, no criminal charges have yet to be filed. And if you're screaming out of frustration right now, remember, I'm just the messenger, and I'm going to bring you even more bad news. In Idaho, there's a similar situation. And if that situation in Idaho gives us any inclination about how this might roll forward, charges probably aren't coming soon in Colorado. Okay, here's the Idaho story. Back in 2021, Downard Funeral Home in Pocatello, Idaho, was reported for nearly the same circumstances. People in a nearby apartment complex complained of a foul odor, and they also believed they could see a corpse on a table for several days through one of the windows. Owner Lance Peck had been part of a research project with Idaho State University, where families could agree to have their loved ones used for research, and then the remains would be cremated and returned to the families. And Downard Funeral Home would be the middle piece. They would make sure the body would get to Idaho State University, and then the cremated remains would get to the family. Now, the contract between the funeral home and the university, it had lapsed. Yet the funeral home owner wasn't cremating the bodies and returning the remains to the family, even though he was promising to do so and pretending like the bodies were going to Idaho State University. Now, during the search of the funeral home, investigators found 12 unidentified and decomposing bodies, also 61 fetuses, and broken refrigeration units. It was nearly a year before investigators filed charges against the owner, Lance Peck, and they did so with a preface that they were doing it because they needed to file before the statute of limitations expired. Peck was charged with 63 misdemeanor charges, 60 counts of unprofessional conduct by a mortician, and 3 counts of petty theft. Well, a year later, the case was vacated right before it was to go to trial. Here's the problem. It seems that the laws concerning this behavior haven't been established. In the Idaho case, prosecutors want to charge Peck with felony charges, but there isn't existing case law. So the whole process has been slowed and in some ways thwarted. Peck is being sued civilly by 13 different clients following the discovery of the rotting bodies, which is, I guess, one way families can get justice. But the criminal charges are just lackluster in my opinion, and we really don't have anyone to blame. It's just the situation. Now, one such civil lawsuit has been filed by the family of Stanley Young. According to East Idaho News, Stanley found out he was going to die from cancer. He wanted to make the process as easy as possible on his family. He also wanted to help save others who might be diagnosed with his type of cancer. So he made arrangements with Downard Funeral Home to lessen what the family would need to do at the time of his passing, and also to assure that his remains would be used for research at Idaho State University. Once the investigation ensued at Downard Funeral Home, his family learned that Stanley was among several bodies that had never been delivered to the university as planned. Stanley's family would be led to believe the university would have possession of their father's cancer-riddled body for 5 years, and then the university would return the body to Peck, and he would cremate the body and deliver the remains to the family. Stanley's family actually learned through news reports that the contract between the university and Peck had been unfulfilled for years, and they knew then that their father's wishes had not been respected. They're now left with a box of ashes that they're not even sure are the remains of their father. And I guess I'll just suppose here that they're also left with little justice, since Peck has yet to be held accountable. Now, no new trial dates have been set in the Idaho case, and to be honest, it's unclear where prosecutors go from here. And my fear is the Colorado case will suffer from the same fate. No case law that makes it possible for the charges that you and I might deem appropriate, they can't even be filed or brought forward because it just doesn't exist. And in the Colorado case, with at least 115 bodies, it will take months for investigators to determine through fingerprints, dental work, and DNA of the bodies to even identify and notify families of their loved ones. I'm just holding on to one positive note, and that is that the funeral homes, both the one in Colorado and Idaho, have been shut down, and no more families will be abused through their practices. Well, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. If you love what you're hearing here, make sure to check out the podcasts Murder with My Husband and Binged. And if you've landed on this page because of Binged or Murder with My Husband, I just got to ask you, aren't those two just the cutest? You guys, thanks for the 5-star reviews and the case suggestions. And if you haven't left a review, please do. You can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.